first slide, name and affiliation, which is visual arts. I will start by going backwards into some older projects that were relational pieces. I was really interested, and this interest is carried through and kind of really inspired the Braille work, with the role of the artist versus the role of the viewer or the curator or the collector, and changing those roles around, and the idea of art being a democratic platform, because in some circles, if you say that your work is very democratic, it means that you're dumbing it down. Whereas I was trying to push it towards an accessibility that raised the level of conversation. This piece is called Portrait Project, and what I would do is go to various public venues and set up a little kiosk that looked like, you go to Fisherman's Wharf and there's a caricature drawer and they'll sell you your picture. But with these, I engaged people walking by, random folks off the street, and asked them to draw my portrait that I would then purchase from them. So I was exchanging the role of artist and collector, purveyor, and passerby. And the conversations that ensued, like getting people to step out of their comfort zone, they were like, even when you offer them money, so many people were hesitant. They're like, I can't draw, I can't do that, I can't. They've been told, I can't. Don't, you're not an artist. But you give them this opportunity, and there is such joy, in just taking that step. So crossing that boundary was really exciting for me. And then this piece was another one where I crossed boundaries. It's called Colony. It's been in Italy and it's been shown here in San Francisco. And the idea was to play with the idea of appropriation and transubstantiation. So what I did was I appropriated several well-known works of art, Ana Menendez, Tom Marioni, and Felix Gonzalez Torres. So here I sort of appropriated Tom Marioni's piece, drawing a line as far as I could reach. And what I did is I drew a line that described the extent of my reach. And then I filled that circle with compost and soil from my garden. I've been at the same location and building soil and creating soil. So it really is like a transubstantiation, taking that soil, moving it to the gallery space, and then you can see here there's a little bucket with bags. So people were then allowed to dig their hands into that dirt or dig their hands into my body. You see in the first slide, that's my height, width, depth, so that's the shape of my body. Thank you, Ana Menendez. And that's the soil. So it's exactly the same mass as my body. And people from all over the world have taken the soil and used it to start their own compost or planted flowers in it or just scattered it in their garden. So again, it was that idea of sharing and interacting and crossing lines and creating a new kind of intimacy. And all of this, it's interrelational work, but it sort of led me back to this idea of making objects and making things that are a little bit more traditional. So I was very interested in Braille and this idea of reading and language and a coding system that sighted people don't use, because we think about language and reading as something that's all in our eyes, and yet it can be a full sensory experience. And when you take the eye out of reading and just give someone this coded system to interact with, there's an intimacy and a curiosity that's sparked, and also the idea of getting people in a gallery situation to put their hands on the walls, to put their hands on the art. That's like such a big taboo, and I've usually had to either be physically present in the gallery or have attendants there so that they can encourage people to touch the work. Now these Braille pieces that I'm showing now are all done with casts from my body. So there are teeth, fingertips, nipples, there's some lips later maybe in here. And they're adhered and painted and lit so that when you first walk in, you can't really see them. and you can only see them by touching them. And as more and more people interact with the piece, it leaves traces and details start to become apparent. And especially with the nipple pieces, people tend to get a little freaked out when they realize that they've just been rubbing their hands along a line of my nipples. But it is kind of an intimate gesture, you know? You think about it's the first thing that you interact with as a baby. When you're coming out of the womb, it's like, it's life. It's not just porn or sex, it's life. And there's actually fingertips on the other side over here. But this image of one of the viewers where she found herself unconsciously touching her own breast as she was reading the piece, I thought was really fascinating, that kind of shared impulse to explore her own body while reading the Braille piece here. And this piece, again, white on white, lit to be really difficult to see, so difficult to document. This piece is called I Am, and that's what the Braille says. And you had to climb up a ladder about 7 feet, and the Braille is in teeth from my mouth. And people were able to like reach up and run their fingers along my teeth while perched on this very precarious ladder. So this is someone interacting with a piece called This Much, and it changes configurations wherever it's installed. This version was 10 feet by 26 feet, and it just repeats the word this much over and over again because it is this much. It takes up the whole wall or the whole space. And it also describes how much people are able to touch. So they're my fingertips, and again, people are coming into this space and we're touching each other, except that we're not touching each other, but we are touching each other. And this much of the piece gets read every time someone touches it, but this much of it exists. So it plays with the idea of spatiality and the sort of Cartesian points on the wall, but they all become blurred lines, and people are creating their own corner of this much with the piece. And yeah, here's another one where you can't see it. I'm so sorry, it showed up on my computer screen. But you can see there's some tiny little bits of color over here on the wall where I decided to do something that was a little bit more pop arty and even a little bit more intimate. Those are Nico candy dots. So I started doing candy Braille on the wall, and you would read that with your tongue by licking it off the wall. And that was a fun one to get the first few people to try. And the pieces start off here. There's a little disinfectant that's usually somewhere between 80 and 100 proof vodka that we squirt on the wall after each person reads the piece. So it becomes progressively more alcoholic, which helps people to relax. And you can see that after a while, people just sort of start enjoying themselves. And it also starts to bleed down the wall, creating these little color field paintings. And the pieces also dissolve and disintegrate, and just you'll end up with nothing but the traces of saliva, alcohol, and food coloring. It starts off a little bit like that. Oops. Yeah, we're missing some color definition here, but you can see that they're blending and bleeding and disappearing. And the funny story about all of these slides and the idea of plastic art in the digital age is that with plastic art, you do have something to go back and reshoot when your computer's stolen and you lose all your documentation, which happened to me. So I'm going to be brief tonight and say thank you. Sorry about so few slides, but that's me.